The world's wine professionals gather February 23rd through 26th for Wine Future 2021, the first fully virtual international wine business conference. Join over 50 speakers, including Francis Ford Coppola, UNESCO's Irina Bokova, and the OIV's Pau Roca, as they share solutions to the challenges of the pandemic, economic recession, climate crisis, and systemic inequities facing the world today. Register now at www.winefuture2021.com to be part of the future of wine, presented by Wines of Portugal.
Welcome everyone to the 8th and final webinar in Wine Future 2021 series of webinars. This one entitled Sustainability Matters. And before I introduce you to the assembled crew for this, I'd like my partner in Wine Future 2021, its founder, Pancho Campo, to share a few words with you, please. Pancho.
Good afternoon from Marbella, beautiful day in south of Spain. Good morning in other parts of the world. I want to welcome you to this last webinar of this series that we created to promote Wine Future. Wine Future was created as a result of the economical recession that was hitting the world back in 2009. We wanted to offer solutions, but also inspiration to the people that were going through very difficult times. It was time to revitalize Wine Future. I think never our society has been at such a crucial moment with numerous challenges and numerous crises overlapping. Not only the pandemic has affected the entire world. I can't think of any part of the world, any country that hasn't had the virus, the economic recession, the systemic inequities, discrimination. But there's one problem that has been underlying and will continue to affect us, and that's the climate crisis, the damage we're doing to our biodiversity, and the damage that we're all doing to our planet. This is something that really touches my heart. I've been researching climate change for the last almost 20 years. I have gone to the Arctic Circle all the way to South Africa, diving with sharks to see how the changing temperatures has affected the coral reefs and the different, marine biodiversity. It is happening. It will stay with us even when we manage to solve the pandemic. So that's why for me, this panel is extremely important. And I thank very much Ellen Mccoy for being the moderator, Beberlin from Chateau Montrose for being one of our guest speakers, and Rob Symington from the legendary house in Portugal. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing with us your experience, your knowledge. I hope, like us, under the umbrella and the spirit of Wine Future, you inspire people to take action and find solutions to the climate crisis and to be more sustainable. Thank you very much. And David, all yours.
Thank you, Pancho. We'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday when you'll share more with us about your perspective on the climate crisis. So joining us here today is the aforementioned Ellen Mccoy, who for 2 decades has been the wine columnist and global wine critic for Bloomberg News and Pursuits, a contributor to Decanter and the World of Fine Wine, and has recently added the new podcast, The Wine Conversation, to her retinue. She's also the author of several wine books, including the best-selling The Emperor of Wine, The Rise of Robert and Parker Jr., and The Reign of American Taste. Ms. Mccoy has written and spoken widely on sustainability, and she's currently at work on a book about the wines of Sonoma, California. Ellen, please.
Hi, David. Thank you for that nice introduction. I just want to also remind people that you can ask questions in the chat room and that David will coalesce all of them, but we will address them at the end of the session so we don't really interrupt what's going on too much. So I am very, very excited about moderating this panel. And first, it's because I think that sustainability in the face of climate change is the most important topic for the wine industry in the 21st century. And it used to be a term, sustainability used to be a term that was just sort of wishy-washy. You didn't really know what it meant because every single bottle of wine practically on the back label said, we're sustainable, with no clarity about what that really entailed. Now, however, I think people have come to realize that they have to be more defined about what it is. And it's come to go beyond just the environment, but also to take in social sustainability. How do people treat their workers in wineries? How do they relate to the community? And of course, underpinning that all is financial sustainability, without which you can't do anything about the first two. So second, I'm really excited because I have two people here that are going to talk to you about a lot of these issues, and they are the properties that they are involved with have been absolute leaders in the world in terms of sustainable actions. So please welcome Hervé Berlon. Raise your hand, Hervé.
Hi.
He is the CEO of Chateau Monrose in the Bordeaux appellation of Saint-Estèphe, which is owned by Martin and Olivier Bouygues. And Hervé has decades of experience in Bordeaux at the greatest estates. Also welcome Rob Symington, who is one of the fifth generation, right? Fifth generation of Symington family estates, which owns quintas in the Douro region of Portugal, as well as branching out now into other regions. And he is the face of the Symington sustainability initiatives. There are many people, or not that many, but some in his generation, and this is the role that he's taken on. So welcome to you both. And I want to start with the big picture, the big why. And that is, can you talk briefly, each of you, about why is sustainability so important in the 21st century? And let's start with you, Hervé, because almost as soon as the Bouygues brothers purchased Monrose in 2006, they started making sustainability changes. Why did they do that?
Well, there were two main reasons. First of all, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar. The two main reasons were to protect our people, because we realized that the people, their health is important. We like to keep them in good health, and to protect our vineyard, our terroir, because we only have one. We're only dealing with one terroir. It's not replaceable, and we have to respect it. And both with the objective to produce better wines.
That's a great answer. And Rob, you know, you joined your family business just a few years ago. And you pushed really early on for the sustainability initiatives that you've even done in such a short time. What were your reasons for deciding you wanted to push them in that direction?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. When I joined my family business in 2017, having spent the best part of a decade doing other things, building a business in another sector, I was actually pushing at an open door because the company had a long track record, like many family wine companies, of trying to do the right thing in the vineyard and with the local community. So it wasn't that I created all of this out of nothing. It was that the urgency and the level of ambition now in this phase was greater than it had ever been. And I'll go back to your question of why. I think, I mean, for someone who's going to be working well into the second half of this century, who knows what the retirement age will be for my generation. But there's another S word that is relevant here, not sustainability, but survival. And I know that sounds dramatic, but honestly, when you look at what global science is telling us about the trajectory that we are on, this is not just about doing the right thing and having a nice comms strategy. This is existential, especially for a wine company that relies on nature for its product. It relies on a stable climate. So, and the other slightly provocative thing to say is that people talk about sustainability. And like Pancho just said in his intro, what are we seeking to sustain? Are we seeking to sustain our present destructive way of life? Or are we trying to transform it into something that is way more in harmony and way more sane based on the finite resources of our planet? So it's a few big statements, but ultimately it's about looking at where we're headed and saying, well, okay, we can't control everything, but what can we do within our sphere of activity to take responsibility for our impact and try to be part of the solution?
Such a good statement. And I want to go to you, Hervé, because really the Bouygues brothers, who own Monroe's, as I said, brought a global environmental mindset from their entire other businesses. And could you talk about starting with their strategy? I mean, why did they feel that and how did they feel that these other ideas that they'd had in their construction businesses and so on how were they going to translate that into their wine business?
I just want to say that the first step was to think about the future and the consequences. I mean, Rob talked about it earlier on, of keeping conventional methods. Formerly, and I'm old enough to say that, I mean, 40, 50 years ago, after the Second World War, the subject was to produce wine regularly, hence the use of pesticides and all the rest of it. Today, the goal is to produce quality wine as opposed to quantity. So the decisions are relatively easy to take when you're dealing with a family. And the Bouygues are a family which they've always been sensitive to the sustainability subject, and they had already implemented into their businesses. I mean, they are big builders of big buildings all over the world, and they had already implemented a sustainable strategy by working very much on isolation of buildings, on new methods of producing energy, and they wanted to apply that into Chateau Montrose. And this was very innovative for a border chateau. And this was back in 2006 when the decision was taken that for the renovation plan and program for Chateau Montrose, they would implement in the renovation a completely brand new isolation system for the buildings, completed, and we managed to save something like 50% of the energy consumption by doing that. And this was completed by our own production of energy from solar panel. We have covered most of the roofs with solar panels, and also a geothermal system, both covering today most of our needs in terms of energy consumption. And this is a free energy.
We're going to talk more about energy, Hervé, but it's really interesting how the idea, I think, of people coming from another business where they have, used technology to come to the wine industry with some of those same things. And obviously it's sort of in the DNA of the family. I mean, I want to now turn to Rob again. And Rob, you had said something to me when we were talking before we started this webinar about the whole idea of future-proofing your mindset. And can you talk about what that means in terms of how you go about starting the initiatives that you undertake?
Sure. I mean, I think it's fair to say that in the past, sustainability from a business perspective was more seen as a sort of niche activity to do with CSR, corporate social responsibility. And if I'm honest, it was about avoiding being criticized and possibly just doing some good marketing. Like you said, putting sustainability on the bottles. And really, the way we at Symington are thinking about this area is about risk management. It's about business continuity threats. And it's about ensuring that the organization itself is resilient and can withstand the threats and challenges that we know are coming. So the mindset is very much now one of preparedness, resilience, and building sustainability into the DNA of every process, and not just, well, let's do something on the side to make ourselves and other people feel good.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I want to go back to Hervé because he started talking about something that I really think is important. I mean, we tend to think about, when we think about sustainability, and I think when, you know, most consumers think about sustainability, we think about the vineyard. We think about what the soil is like, and we'll get to that. But let's first talk, I think, about energy, which you just mentioned, Rob. The whole idea of energy, which includes everything from shifting to renewable energy, to being energy efficient in the winery, to reducing your carbon footprint, all of these things. Hervé, I mean, I remember the first time I went to visit Monroe's after all of the construction had started, and just being a little dumbfounded by how much you were doing all at once. And talk about the different things that Monroe's has done in terms of energy, and how long did it take you to do all that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to remind people that we have a global vision of sustainability. Everything is open for the future. Every subject is open for the future. And we like to go step by step and analyze everything in every way where we can improve the situation today. And one of the things where we started was to calculate our carbon footprint. And we realized that there are things in the global carbon footprint of Chateau Montrose that on which we can have an influence, and other things on which we can't have an influence. But we started to work with things on which we can have an influence. And the production of carbon was coming in particular from fermentation, the fermentation vats. And tons of carbon dioxide was getting out of the vats. And we thought about a system where we could capture the CO2 and transform it into bicarbonate of sodium or potassium, both being of some use into the industry. And we installed a new machinery on which was almost brand new. I mean, I think it was tested in another chateau before, but we decided to go global once again, and then capture all the CO2 from fermentation. And now we are producing tons of bicarbonate of sodium or potassium, but we are recycling the CO2 for a better use instead of letting it go in the open air. So this is a good example of the action you can take in a chateau. It's not such a costly exercise. By doing that, we actually save money rather than spending money. So I think it's a good decision. And we recently reanalyzed the carbon footprint of the estate, and I can tell you that within the last 3-4 years, we have diminished by something like 35% the carbon footprint by taking such actions. So
that's really fantastic. But I think also, you know, you have installed an amazing amount of solar panels. You're using geothermal energy as well. And let me pull Rob in and just ask you, so many of your goals for 2025, which is only 4 years away, so many of your goals relate to energy and to water, and you're also creating a new low impact winery. So could you say something about what are the goals? Which are the aspects that you're trying to do something about in terms of energy? And tell us a little about the new winery and why you're going for LEED certification and what that is.
LEED certification actually comes from the States. It's a green building certification. It stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. Now here in Portugal, and I'm sure in many wine regions around the world, we're usually operating in buildings that were built 200 years ago. So we have a rare opportunity here at Symington to build a new winery on at Quinta do Ataíde, which is our organic vineyard. It's actually the largest organic vineyard in northern Portugal. And so this is a fantastic once in a generation opportunity to build a new winery. And frankly, we could have built a much cheaper shed to make wine in without adding all the sustainability aspects to it. But we decided to make the investment in what will be the first LEED certified winery in Portugal, because this is a declaration of intent. It's saying, okay, from now on going forwards, wherever we have the opportunity, we will use all of the technologies at our disposal to make wine in the most responsible way possible. So there's a fantastic opportunity for us to do this, and it'll be online by not this harvest, but the 2022 harvest.
And can you say a little bit about what are the energy saving aspects of this winery? I know that at Monroe's, for example, one of the things that was so impressive to me, because it's a very beautiful old building, was how they had taken down some of the walls to put in extra insulation and then rebuilt it so that it would look perfectly as though it were just what it had always been. So they were taking a 300-year-old, well, not a 300-year-old, but an old building and retrofitting it to be more energy efficient. You're starting with a new building. What are the most important aspects of what you're trying to do in terms of energy?
Yeah, well, there's to be honest, a lot of this stuff is very basic construction and architectural design principles. So things like LEED specifies a certain percentage of the facility's energy has to be produced on site. Sorry, 1 second, my daughter's at the sorry, the challenges of working from home. So it has things like we have to capture a certain percentage of, we have to capture all of the rainfall that lands on the site to then treat it and use it in the processes. We have to generate a certain percentage of the building's needs of energy on site. We transferring most of the wine using gravity, so the way we lay out the facility instead of electric pumps. So there's a ton of stuff. And I said it's more expensive to build, but in the long run, it's way cheaper to run this site. So, you know, that's the business case for sustainability. And as Hervé will tell you, many times, the payback is not very long on making these decisions. So it's just smart business sense as well.
And Hervé, I think you're actually selling energy. I think you're selling your excess energy at this point. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct, because we can't store electricity produced. So we have to sell it to the National Electricity Office and then buy it back from them. But by doing so, we are making a small profit on these strange deal. But it's the only reason is that because we don't use energy constantly the same way all the year round. We use more energy at harvest time, for instance, than in the winter time. And so therefore the consumption is going up and down. And we don't have the facility or the system able to capture this energy and then save it aside. So we are making, but I mean, as Rob said, I mean, by going sustainable, we are in the beginning maybe spending a little bit more money than get the feedback of this investment. Really, I mean, green waste is a good example. We are recycling all the green waste of the estate. And before that, the compost that we were using in the vineyard was bought outside of the vineyard, and we had to pay such a price for it. Now we are recycling the green waste and then making our own compost. By doing that, we save 50% of the expense. So this is just a small example, but it's not costing much more money to go sustainable.
I think that's really such an important important factor. And I want to turn now to the whole idea of vineyards. What, Rob, we'll go to you and then to Hervé. Is it important to be certified organic? What should 21st century vineyards be like?
Big question. We need about an hour or a 20,000 word essay, but I
know that, but I'm going to keep you to a very short answer.
I'll be very short. I think consumers are rightly skeptical about sustainability claims made by brands and wine brands. So organic is one of the few things in wine that cuts through. So I think it's important because it does represent a ton of responsible and minimum intervention stuff in the vineyard. So I think that makes sense. It's not a panacea, and there's some downsides as well involving more tractor use. What does a 21st century vineyard look like? I would like to hope that going forward, it looks like less of a mindset of minimizing negative impacts and more of one of maximizing healing, without trying to sound like too much of a hippie, regeneration, which is a buzzword which I hope you will hear a lot more of in terms of agriculture and viticulture going forwards this century.
That's such an important thing. And I want to turn to Hervé because recently you were certified organic, your vineyards were certified organic. And you have been very passionate about the whole idea about biodiversity and what that contributes to the soil in the vineyard. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing? I know you have so many varieties of butterflies. You told me that. I was very impressed.
Now we are very fortunate because we work on an estate which is a single part estate. So it covers all together with the woods, all the free land, something like 125 hectares. And the vineyard itself is only 90 hectares. So we have 35 hectares of free land where we can keep nature in the most natural way. And these are nests for birds, for insects, and we like to keep this natural environment alive as much as possible. And then what we did recently was to reinforce the presence of nature in everything we do. I mean, the key word in the past was to get rid of the grass, get rid of everything that was not vines. Today, we have understood that keeping a natural environment was keeping a natural additional resource to the estate. And we are, again, I mean, we are very fortunate to have such a large land, which is composed of so many things that are making the biodiversity not just a word, but it's reality for us. And we want to keep it as much as possible, of course.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I want to go back quickly to Rob about the whole idea of regenerative farming, which is a new, it's not really a new concept, but it's newly being talked about in terms of wine. Could you just say a quick word? I realize, yes, we could talk about it for 3 days. So people understand what is regenerative farming and why, perhaps why it's a new thing for wineries to be interested in.
Yeah, well, I mean, the caveat here is that Symington, although we do practice various vineyard techniques that would fall within regenerative farming involving cover cropping, organic, and various other interventions, we're certainly not deploying a regenerative methodology writ large. One of the reasons is purely the financial sustainability. We farm the largest area of mountain vineyard on earth. We have amongst the lowest yields per hectare and the highest costs per kilo of grapes. So like you said at the beginning in your intro, Ellen, there's social, there's environmental, and there's financial sustainability. But my understanding of regenerative is basically saying, well, instead of just saying, how can I minimize harm? How can I farm in such a way that I'm actually adding back to the soil and to the environment more than I'm taking out? And actually, through our participation in International Wineries for Climate Action, IWCA, we're part of, there's a working group in IWCA, which is looking at carbon farming. So how can a vineyard sequester carbon from the atmosphere to combat climate change? And interestingly, the way that you would do that is you would farm your vineyard in a regenerative way so that you're building soil, so that you're adding to the microbiodiversity of the soil and you're capturing carbon. So a ton of these things are linked. And I think we're at a really exciting time as a global wine community because you're going to see more and more pioneers in this space. And I hope that we'll play a part in that as well.
Yeah, such a good explanation of that. And I want to go back to you, Hervé, because, you know, we've talked about the vineyard a little bit. We've talked about energy. And in fact, we could, as Rob points out, and you've pointed out, Hervé, we could talk for several days about all these topics. But one of the things that I would like to talk about that you had mentioned to me was that the whole idea of doing things for the employees and involving doing research about ways that you can make work easier for employees, that you can, that's part of the whole idea of taking care of your employees and the whole social sustainability aspect. Can you talk about these ergonomic tools that you've been working on?
Yeah, we have, I mean, for us working in the vineyard and for the soil and for the proper maintenance of the soil is as important as to work for the people. We need our people, and we need to keep them in good health. I've seen too often in my life people retiring and being completely exhausted and being completely, not dead, but they're really suffering from many diseases. This is not the goal today. The goal today is to keep people healthy until the end of their business life. And we can create, and we have created already with the group, the BRICS group, some organic tools to help certain gesture, certain position of the fuel, both in the vineyards or in the cellars. And I mean, this is something we call exoskeleton, which is a new system. It's a sort of equipment that you're wearing, and that is helping you in suffering less for some painful positions. So we have developed that at the same time as we are developing a new generation of machineries to work in the vineyards. Robot is the answer of tomorrow. Conventional tractor, especially when they are moved with gasoline engines, that's not for us anymore. We're working on electric tractors for the future and so many other things. But I mean, keeping the employees in good health is a goal, is a very important goal.
That's so great. And Rob, I want to go to you on the whole social sustainability angle too, because I'm thinking of two different things that you're doing that really were interesting to me. One, you're involved in something called Rewilding Portugal, which in a sense sort of relates back to the idea of biodiversity, but is involved with, well, you explain it.
Well, rewilding is a global approach to conservation. There are many countries in the world which have rewilding organizations. And the rewilding approach it's about large-scale conservation, it's keystone species and predators, but also working with local communities to catalyze sustainable economic activity which works to preserve the natural resources rather than to exploit or extract them. So there's a strong social component in the rewilding framework. A year ago, we formed a long-term partnership with Rewilding Portugal because we have the same two-pronged approach. We want to support biodiversity in the Douro region, and we want the communities with whom we work to have a sustainable economic future as well. So that was why we partnered with them. The Douro is a fascinating and beautiful region. There are 20,000 growers here. My family buys from almost 1,000 grape farmers. Many of their grandparents were selling grapes to my grandparents. And the average, let me put it this way, 92% of those farmers have less than 5 hectares of vineyard. So these are community growers in many cases who have other jobs and they have their vineyard. And unless we as a company are actively thinking about the future of the region and supporting those communities to have a sustainable economic future, we won't be able to stay in business. So this is a virtual circle. This is like enlightened self-interest. Unless the community is healthy, a producer like my family also won't have a positive future. So we're all in it together.
We're all in it together. I think that's such a good note on which to turn to another question. Hervé, go over to you. What do you think is coming next in sustainability in the future? I mean, the Bouygues brothers in particular have been so involved with forward-thinking technology. When you look ahead to, I don't know, the next 5 or 10 years at Monrose, what are you seeing that you're going to be tackling in terms of sustainability?
Well, we are going to take care more and more about our soil, our terroir, because this is not replaceable, as I said before. And we are already starting some studies and researches in the terroir itself in order to, the philosophy behind all that is that whatever we take from the nature, we have to give it back to the nature. So in order to keep the terroir in good shape, to transmit, to give it to the future generations. So everything which is linked with this goal is therefore becoming acceptable, and we have to do it. So there is no particular, working lighter and lighter the soil is an issue. Using less and less product in the soil is an issue in order to produce our wine in the most natural way. And preserving the terroir, and then adjusting the future to the climate change on which we can have. We are one of the actors. We're not the only actor. So we are facing a situation where the climate change is going to change slightly, not necessarily our methods, but our way of looking at the terroir, which grape variety will be most appropriate to work in the future. Definitely, we're going to reduce the amount of Merlot produced on the estate and increase the number of Cabernet Sauvignon. We are going to reduce the number, the leaves. We're going to leave more leaves on the grapes in order to cover more the grapes themselves and protect them. Pick the grapes a little bit earlier. A number of small decisions are going to be taken in order to keep the same quality as we have been doing in the future. Going for clonal selection, for massal selection is another subject. We are fortunate enough to deal with a very old vineyards on which, a good 25% is from grapes, from vines having been planted before 1960. So they are very original vine varieties, and they probably have clones that are very interesting because they are the most authentic clones we can have on the property in order to keep the style of Montrose. So
wow, it's so interesting. I can see that you have a full plate that you're working with, and a lot of it has to do with further research into just what aspects of soil are important. There are so many additional things that we do not yet know. And maybe I could turn, I see that our time is running down, and I just would like to ask you, Rob, if you could tell other producers one thing that they can do right now to be more sustainable, what would it be? One thing.
Well, I'm not sure if this is dodging your question, Ellen, but
will be.
I think having public measurable goals with timelines is crucial. And I think that's crucial for two reasons. One is credibility. And I think credibility is super important in the sustainability space. And the other is accountability, because as an organization, if you stick your neck out and say, we will try and achieve this by this date and we'll publicly report on our progress towards it, you're much more likely to achieve that thing. And so, you know, what we're talking about here is change, and change is often hard. It involves, you know, the human component, but it also involves the systemic component. So I would say have public measurable goals that you report on regularly. And if possible, use third-party frameworks to drive that credibility.
That's a really good goal. The idea of having an external pressure on you that you're sort of responsible for, and that certainly both of you have taken the lead in saying early along. I remember Monroe's, you couldn't really go to Monroe's without someone telling you, oh, and by the way, look at what we've done here, and making a point to say how important it was. And you, Rob, and the Symington Group have become a B Corporation, essentially pledging yourself, while of course the Bouygues brothers are also part of the UN Climate Action Group, I'm pretty sure. And I think I'm gonna sort of pull it in now and just say to David, do we have any questions that we should be addressing? I'm looking here and—
Not at this time, you've been most comprehensive, apparently.
Well, I have felt we've only touched the surface of what we could be saying about the subject. And I know that you, Hervé, and you, Rob, have so much more that you could share on these topics. I urge everyone who's listening to this to please go to their websites, the Chateau Monroe's website, over to the Symington website, and you will see recounted there all the many things that both of these people and these enterprises are doing that I hope more people will copy. Thank you so much to both of you for being part of this. Thanks, David, for hosting this along with Pancho. And thank you to you, the audience out there who's been listening. Go and become more sustainable.
Well done. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Hervé. Wow, great presentation. Just a hint of what's going to occur next week when Ellen hosts a comparable session entitled Sustainability Matters on our final day, Friday the 26th. So a little bit of housekeeping here. Remember, please spread the word of Wine Future 2021, hashtag WineFuture2021. And to remind people that there will be available as an option, simultaneous translation into Spanish for those wishing it. We're gonna have some interesting entertainment that's being put together as we speak by Dan Nicol of South Africa. And Dan really likes wine. And that's gonna be a daily entertainment break in the middle. And please also, when you're at the website, go to our auction page. The auction lots are filling up. There's a lot of great wine to be considered. So for those of you who have a taste for it or the space for it, please check out our auction page. And we look forward to seeing you at next week's Wine Future 2021. Bye now.